Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at something that I think a lot of people who are in any sort of service-oriented role, especially like pastors, might really kind of connect with.
Yeah.
And that is, how do you balance? How do you navigate that feeling of you want to serve, you have this passion to serve, but sometimes it can feel a little bit like ugh, it feels like an obligation. You know,
It's a tough one.
yeah. And specifically today we're going to be looking at pastoral visitations.
Right.
And we have some really interesting source material today that is it's all about um, advice that was given to a young pastor who was really struggling with this.
Mm.
He wants to connect with his congregation,
Yeah.
but those pastoral visits, they were starting to feel like a chore, not a calling.
Yeah. I think it's something we can all relate to in some ways.
Yeah, totally, totally. I mean, think about I think everybody has a hobby,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
that they just loved, and then at some point it just starts to feel like, ugh.
Yeah, like one more thing on the to-do
Yeah,
list.
exactly. So what is it? What is it about this kind of dynamic that happens here?
Well, I think it's that shift, from being intrinsically motivated, right? You're doing something because you love it, you're passionate about it, to then it becomes more extrinsically motivated, where you feel like you have to, or you should, or there's pressure to do it.
Oh yeah.
And I think especially with pastoral work, there's a lot of expectations tied to the role, not just from the congregation, but even for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not just like going to work and doing your job.
Right.
This is you're showing up for people's lives.
Yeah.
You're showing up for, their spiritual well-being. So how do you prevent that sense of duty from kind of overshadowing everything?
Well, I think first it's important to recognize that those feelings, that tension between passion and obligation, that's normal. That's not a sign that you're failing or you're not cut out for this. I think it's a very natural part of navigating a role like this that's very demanding.
Well,
The key is to not let it just, fester there and lead to disengagement or even burnout.
oh yeah. I mean, ignoring that little check engine light, so to speak,
Right.
it's not going to make things better. But what causes this? I mean, why why does this internal struggle even happen in the first place?
Well, our source points to a few different potential factors. And fear is a big one. Fear of inadequacy.
Oh,
Maybe not having the right words or wisdom to offer.
yeah.
Pastoral visits can feel very vulnerable, right? You're kind of put on the spot to provide spiritual guidance and support.
I mean, you're walking into people's homes, you're walking into their lives,
Yeah.
and I mean, that could feel really exposing. It's almost like stage fright,
Right.
but the stakes feel much higher.
Exactly. Yeah. And then with that fear can come a loss of connection. If you're so focused on just fulfilling a duty, the genuine human connection, which I think is at the heart of what makes pastoral work so rewarding, that can start to fade.
Right. It becomes more about just checking the box
Yeah.
and less about really being present with the people that you're trying to serve.
Oh,
You know.
right. It's like a musician,
Uh-huh.
who can play, scales perfectly,
Yeah.
but there's no emotion there,
Right.
So it's technically perfect, but it doesn't really move you.
Yeah. There's no soul. There's no soul in it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this also ties into another potential factor, which is this struggle, between a pastor's calling and the kind of day-to-day demands of the role.
Oh yeah.
That internal fire to serve, that can get lost sometimes in all the administrative tasks and meetings and the to-do list.
Oh yeah. Just all the busy work.
And then it creates this disconnect between, their heart and their actions.
Right. So what's the way out of this? How do you bridge that gap and reunite the passion for this really important work?
Well, I think it sounds simple, but I think the first step is to reconnect with your why.
Okay. Yeah.
Remember what drew you to this path in the first place. Was it a desire to serve? Was it a calling to guide others spiritually, a deep connection to your faith?
Yeah.
I think taking the time to kind of reflect on those core motivations can really help to reframe those pastoral visits.
Yeah.
Shift them from being obligations to being opportunities to really live out your calling.
Yeah, I love that. It's like finding your way back to the heart of the forest after you've been lost in the trees for a while.
Well, yes.
Yeah. But sometimes, I mean, even knowing your why, that's not always enough,
Yeah.
what are some practical things people can do? How do you translate that inspiration into action?
I think self-reflection is huge.
Yeah.
Journaling after each visit can be really insightful. What felt draining, what moments brought you joy.
Yeah.
By noticing the patterns, you can really start to pinpoint the areas where maybe you need to adjust your approach.
Right. So it's like collecting data
Yeah.
on your own experiences
Yeah.
to see what works and what doesn't.
Exactly.
Where maybe you need to tweak some things.
Exactly. And also I can't emphasize enough the power of mentorship.
Oh yeah.
Talking to a senior pastor or a trusted colleague who's walked a similar path can provide so much guidance and encouragement and maybe even just a new perspective.
Yeah, it's like having a guide.
Right.
When you're hiking a new trail, they
Yeah.
can point out the potential pitfalls and maybe there's a shortcut here, and help you to appreciate the journey along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, there's no one size fits all approach to pastoral visitations.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to get creative, think outside the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of just formal visits, could you organize some informal gatherings? Maybe even incorporate some of your own hobbies or interests.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, if you love board games, host a game night.
Right.
If you love, if you're a foodie, you love to cook. Maybe it's a potluck.
Uh,
It's about kind of tailoring the experience to the needs of your congregation and also to your own passions too.
exactly. Yeah. It's about finding those authentic points of connection that make the experience enriching for everybody involved.
So what have we learned today? I think what we've really learned is that if you're feeling this sense of conflict, this tension about these pastoral visitations, it doesn't mean that you're failing.
Right.
It's really an invitation. It's a time to pause, reflect,
Mhm.
and try to realign your actions with your calling.
Mhm.
And that process, I mean, it can be challenging,
Mhm.
but ultimately I think it leads to a more fulfilling and meaningful experience
Mhm.
for you and for the people that you serve.
Absolutely. And remember that your well-being is important.
Yeah.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right?
Taking care of yourself,
Okay.
both spiritually and emotionally, is going to ultimately make you a more effective and compassionate pastor.
Yeah. That's so important. So as you're continuing on this journey, here's just something to think about.
Sure.
What if you could just redesign pastoral visitations from scratch?
Yeah.
How would you do it? What would that look like? What would bring you joy?
Mhm.
And connect you with your congregation in a way that felt authentic and meaningful.
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's really about finding your own unique path. One that honors your calling and allows you to serve from a place of genuine passion and connection.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. And remember, you're not alone on this journey. We're all in this together.